Hello guys, welcome to a new video here in JS Education. My name is Carlos Santana and this is a video number 18 for the course developing a headless CMS with TypeScript and GraphQL. So let's start. Okay, as always, we start with ncu-u. Sorry, you need to go to front end and then you need to go to back end and then run ncu-u to update your packages. Looks like I have the latest versions of all of them, so that's cool. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is go into backend, source, data, and we are going to create a new file called system-fields.ts. Okay, and then we are going to put this code here. So basically this is gonna be the system fields that we are going to have by default every time we create a new model. So for example, we create a post model, right? So we are going to have an ID by default. We are going to have a created ad. We are going to have an updated ad. And we are going to have a status. That is like basically the default fields, or I call them system fields that we should have. And if you see here, I'm using negatives numbers on the order. So this is because when we start adding new fields, like custom fields, I want to start from one, positive one, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So that's why the first four system fields are negative. So then when we start adding one, I mean, those are gonna be put it on the beginning on the list. So that's why they are negatives. Okay, so this is the file for this system fields. So the next one is we need to go to GraphQL resolvers model. And here we need to import our system fields that we just create, and then on the create model method, this one, we convert this to be a sync, and then basically we are going to open braces here, and then this one is gonna be const new model equals await, and then we need to execute models.field bulk create system fields, like passing the system fields we just create, and then to system fields I'm passing the new model. That's why here on the system fields we receive the new model, and then the model ID that is related is with new model.id. So this is the way we are connecting that point. And basically, instead of returning an iModel, I'm going to return a promise with the iModel. Okay, now we are going to create a new model on the front end. So basically we should go to front end, source, app, dashboard components, models, and we need to create the file create field model.tsx. Okay, so this file is a little bit larger than the others model we have created so far because we have more fields, but it's pretty much the same logic as we did with the others models. Okay, so this is the code. Basically, okay, we don't need this one. So basically, here we need the form context. We need all of these components from fogg-ui and methods from fogg-utils. We need the use lazy query. Do this bigger. Use lazy query and use mutation from Apollo client. We need two mutations: create field mutation that we are going to create that later, and get model query. Styles and everything is the same. The props are the same. We are going to get the app ID from get params from URL. We I mentioned this before. So basically from the URL we get this, in order we get these parameters, and then we can do the structure of them, so we are getting the app ID. From options, we are going to get data with fields count. So this is gonna be the counter of the fields, like how many fields we already have. Like if you remember the first 4 system fields that I showed you before, it counts like 4, right? Or -4. So basically, in the other component where we send this data, I'm sending the length of the number of fields -4 that are the system. So that returns 0 by default. So the initial order is going to start on 1, right? So that's why it's like that. Okay, so then we set our initial values. The model we have, we get it from option data model identifier, if it's pose or whatever model. The model ID, at this point we don't have it yet. Field name, identifier, order, we get it from the fields count +1. The types, we get that from options.data.type. Default value is empty, description is empty, is height is false, is media false, is unique false, is required by default is true, is system false, and is primary key false. Then we have our values as a state and the required state. This is pretty much the same that we have doing on the last models. The loading state. We get the unchanged and the set value from the form context. We create our mutation function, create field mutation. This is the first time we use this function here, use lazy query. So basically, as you know, when we use query, basically we execute the query right away. But there is sometimes when we want to wait to execute a query only to a certain point or execute it later. So that's why it's been very useful here, the use lazy query. Basically, you just pass the query you want to execute, and it receives an incomplete parameter that basically after the query is completed, you execute this. So once you get the data, you can execute another function. In this case, I'm creating a field with the data I'm getting from the query. And it's pretty much similar to the use mutation, like you are getting a function to execute this later. But of course, you are going to execute a query instead of a mutation. The underscore on change, as you know, is like the overload method for the onChange to affect the identifier when we are modifying the field name, for example, with camel case. If we are changing the order, we're just going to accept number from 0 to 25. If they try to put negatives, we are going to automatically set that to 1. And if it's like higher than 25, we are going to set 25 as the maximum value. And those numbers are going to be treated like a string, basically. Okay, so the onClose basically is to close that model. The create field here is basically we are going to ask, like, if we get the model and we have the ID, then in the values we are going to modify our model ID, and we are going to grab that value from here, from getModel.id. In here we execute the mutation create field mutation, passing the variables for the values. If we get the data correctly, we close the model and we redirect to the self page. This means it's going to redirect to the same exactly page. This function is from fogg-utils. The handled submit is going to get the empty values, field, and identifier. If there is some empty values, it's going to mark them as red. Otherwise, it's going to set the loading, wait for 1 second, and then here is going to execute get model query, then create fields. So the first thing we need to do is get in the model to identify which model we are going to connect with these fields. So we are passing the identifier and the app ID. And then this get model query, then create field. If you remember, on completed, once we complete this query, then we execute create field passing this data. Then create field is this one. We get the data here, we get the model information, and then we can execute the create field mutation. So that's why it's very useful they use lazy mutation in these cases. And then our model, basically we have a field name, the required thing if there is an error, identifier, the order 1 to 25, this is type number. The description is optional, and those are gonna be toggles, and basically they're for putting Boolean values like on, off, or true or false. Basically, we are going to ask this make field required. That means it's required. So basically, if it's on the change, is going to change the is required value. The checked is getting from values that is required, and all of them are exactly the same toggles, just changing the name. I mean, this is for is primary key, this is for is unique, this is for is hide, this is for is media, and then the buttons cancel and create field button. So that's it for this this component. Now you need to go to schema, and then we are going to create a folder called declarations, and inside we are going to create a file called declarations.scss, and let me put the style in here. Okay, so these are the styles. Okay, so those are the styles. Don't worry if you cannot copy those quickly. Remember that the code is on the repository. And then we need to create a new file called index.tsx for our component. Okay, so in this one, we import our create field model. I mean, from models/create field model. We import the styles, we get the declarations and the model. We have to state is open to control the model and a field type to set the type of the field. Like the declarations are basically field types, right? So in here, if we have a field type set, basically when we open the create field model, on the label we are going to say create new and the field type field. So if we select a string, we will say create new string field. If we select a text, create new text, create new number, etc. And here we pass data on the options. The fields count basically is gonna be the models that field that length -4. This is what I told you before. Like I'm resting the or I'm subtracting the 4 system fields that we have by default. Then the type is a field type, model identifier, model.identifier, app ID, position top, height 700 pixels, width 600 pixels. Here we show the list of the fields of declarations we have. Basically, we do a map here, and basically we are going to render each one. On the onClick, we will set the field type with field.declaration and then open the model. And then each icon is going to have a color that comes from the field and the declaration here. Okay, then you need to create a new folder on a schema called fields. And then we're going to create the styles, fields.scss. Okay, so this is the CSS code or the Sass code. So you can take a look here. Those are the, like, I'm putting this with capital letter because it's basically the type of that is coming from the database. And like to avoid start changing that to lowercase, I just put it at is on the database. So that's why it's with capital letters. Those are the icons, and then we have identifier, integer, float, etc. So those are the styles. Now we are going to create the component. So we need to create an index.tsx on fields. So basically here we're going to receive our fields and we're going to receive a flag called show system with true or false to show or hide our system fields. Then we have our fields, we map them, and then basically here the class names are going to have like changing class depending on if it's system or if it's for example, if it's a system, then we show styles.sys. If it's not, then we put the styles and the field type. So basically those are gonna be these ones, the types: string, text, datetime, status, media, boolean, etc. And then if those are system and we have show system boolean as false, that means we don't want to show them, we want to hide them. We add the hide sys class, otherwise we don't add anything, so we are going to show them. And then we have our field type ID, integer, float, datetime, status. We have some of them with icons and some of them with letters here. The status, then string, text, media, boolean, drop down, and then this is gonna be like kind of tags we are going to have. So here we're going to put the field name, the identifier next, and then some information like the field type here, if it's primary key, if it's required, if it's unique, if it's media, is hide, is system field, etc. So, I mean, once you get this, or you will see the UI, you will understand a little bit more how are going to work the fields. Okay, so now we need to go to the index or schema. And basically here, we need to import the toggle component from fogg-ui. Then I'm going to move this top, and I'm going to add, let me remove this one from top. I have fields and declarations that I'm going to import here. Then we have a new state called show system, like to manage the system fields. And then from here, from data, now we are going to get model and get declarations. So we need to validate if we have both. If we don't have get model and get declarations, we return an empty div at the beginning. Then after this div, after the model one, we are going to put our toggle to show the system fields or not. And here we are going to render our fields and then our declarations. We need to pass the fields from getModel.fields and the show system variable. I mean the state that we have, and then the declarations we pass the entire model and the declarations. Now we need to get the GraphQL. We need to create here a declaration folder, and then inside you need to get declarations.query.ts. Basically like this: get declarations, ID, icon, declaration, description, and color. And then on fields, GraphQL new folder fields. You need to create fields folder and then new file. Create field.mutation.ts. And this one is gonna be basically the create field that we have, the mutation. We receive all of these parameters, and basically we execute them and we pass it to the input, and we return, or we get in back the field that we just create, including the new ID. Okay, then we go to pages, dashboard, app ID, stage, model name, model. And in here, we need to import the get declarations query. And basically, we are going to execute after this one. This is a very easy query, get declarations query. So we just execute it directly. Once we have the data here, we just spread that data just with 3 dots like this to our component that we are going to render. So basically that's it. Let's give it a try. So we can run npm run dev. Okay. We go to the dashboard. Let me clean my database so you can like understand more or less the flow, how is it working. Let me go to the backend index. I'm removing everything, putting back on false. Okay, so now, oops, Carlos.Santana at dev.education. We log in, we create a new application, blog. Then we create our first model, post. Here is our like model part. In here we have the model. This was the part that I showed you in the last video. This on the right, those fields are the declarations. We have string, text, dropdown, integer, float, boolean. Those are the show system. If we click here, basically we are going to see our system fields. That's why they are like on gray color. If we click here, we're going to hide them. So let's suppose we are going to create a post schema, right? So we click on the field string. So here we say create new string. Then the field name is going to be title. The order is 1 by default. And then make this required. You can choose here any option you want. So we want this title to be required. We create it. Once it's created, redirects here. So now we have our title. The next one is gonna be the slug. And if you see here, the order automatically changed to 2. But if I try to put like negatives, you see that it's going to remove that. So I'm trying to put like negatives. And if I put like a invalid number, it's going to return 0. Or if I put to put more than 25, for example, 27, is going to put 25 or any number higher. So you can put 2 here and then the slug. Then let's say we want the content, so we select type text, create new text. We say this is the content. We can mark this as required. That's fine. We get the content here, and then let's say you want the author of the post, and maybe this is not required, so I remove that. Okay, author, and then a Boolean value to see if it's published, or not, and the order is gonna be 5, like this, right? So what is, right now the order, I cannot edit those fields yet, but basically, for example, if I create a new screen here, and I create a new field like, I don't know, maybe reading time, and I want to change the order of this to be 2, which already exists. So what it's going to do is basically put me the reading time or the field that I change the order on this. So later when we edit those fields, we are going to be able to change the order of the fields that we want to render here. So that's it pretty much. Let me see if this works. It's not supposed to work with like cell phones, but at least with tablets. So with tablet is supporting the styles, but then for phones it's not looking great yet. But it's not the dashboard is meant to work with desktop and tablet in like mostly. So that's it for this video. I hope you like it. Remember that if you have any question, feel free to join our Slack community. The link is on the description. And also, if you like those videos, please share it with your friends. Help us to grow this community, and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time, and see you in the next video. Bye.